So those of you who didn't really care for my first impression video of this bike, citing how I said nothing and how it was a waste of your time, I don't know what you're upset about. I said in the very beginning of that video that I might not say a lot. Now, having said all that, this episode that you tuned into is my official full review episode of this bike, Specialized Tarmac SL8. I have a lot to say. It's going to be a long video. The good, the bad, the ugly. So sit down, get some coffee, let's go. Hello everyone, how are you? This is yours truly, Diabetic Cycling. This is a channel sponsored by my own damn wallet, but also brought to you by your engagement. So every one of you that click on subscribe, liking this video, and also asking me any questions down below in the comment section, all helpful, and I appreciate your participation. Now, I am not some kind of a cycling magazine chasing advertiser money. I don't own a bike shop with an agenda to sell you anything. I'm not some kind of a douchey influencer that has an agenda to sway you one way or the other. I'm trying to be as transparent and unbiased as possible. I'm as normal as an average guy can get. I may be able to smoke some of you next Saturday, but you might have smoked me last Saturday. So take that for what it's worth. Over the last many years, I have been lucky enough to have owned and ridden bazillion miles on a couple dozen bikes, and any opinion that I share with you in this episode of this bike is based on my experience with all the bikes that I have owned and ridden in the past. Let's establish a baseline. I have zero history on any flavor of Specialized Tarmac. SL4, I don't know if there was SL5, SL6, SL7, this is my very first Tarmac for many reasons that I won't bore you with. So what is a Specialized Tarmac? About this point in my review videos of all the other bikes, this is where I kind of talk about the lineup and the position of a bike in their lineup, but I'm not gonna do that because most of you watching this familiar with Specialized, and you exactly know where Tarmac sits in their lineup. It's basically Tarmac, Ethos, and Roubaix for road offering, and this is their all-arounder road race bike that is enjoyed by all the pros and all the enthusiasts. Dare I say it might even be a de facto standard bike that every road bike is measured against. Probably largely because they have the most amount of dollars that they spend on sponsoring all these pro teams. And if for year 2024, aren't there like 3 or 4 teams that are riding Tarmacs? So, you know, inevitably it'll draw comparison from all these other bikes. Hey, is it as good as a Tarmac? Like I said in my previous episode, at some point right now, we live in a golden age of like a bike of where no company really makes bad bikes. Every company makes great bikes, and this bike is no exception. It is a great bike. Okay, there, I've given up something right away. But there are some things that I don't like about this bike, and that's what I'm here to share with you. Okay, so let's cover my build first. It is a Specialized Tarmac SL8 size 52 frame set. Comes in at 880 grams in that size, in this matte finish. The build is basically 100% Shimano Ultegra build. Drivetrain is built with the Shimano Ultegra 12-speed Di2, which is basically the sweet spot. I love this. You get all the performance of Dura-Ace without double the cost that Dura-Ace brings, just to save a couple hundred grams. Now that said, I actually do like the new 105 Di2 12-speed a lot, and I might threaten my favorite groove set for the time being. Now, if you want me to produce a video where I talk about Ultegra versus 105, do leave a comment and I'll put that together. The bottom bracket is from a company called BB Infinite. In terms of everything spinning, my crank set 50-34, 170 mil crank length, and stages power meter left side only. My cassette in the back is 11-34. My rotors are 160 mil front and rear. My saddle is a Selle Italia Boost Superflow Carbonio, which has been my favorite for the last couple of years. So during my time, the bike is rolling on Shimano Dura-Ace wheels. The front has been either C36 or C50. The rear has been either C50 or C60. Now, that said, the tires are 27 mil NV SES tires, front 27 mil, which measures out to actually 28. And then the rear is NV SES 29 mil, which actually measures out to hair over 30 mil. You might ask, okay, so earlier you said you didn't care for Dura-Ace groove set, but you're riding on Dura-Ace wheels, and you know, what gives? The difference, the gain you get from Dura-Ace, like a groove set, is nowhere near the difference you get from the Dura-Ace wheels. So currently, even compared with all the other high-end wheels like NV SES 4.5 that I ride, I also ride on Zip 404, Firecrest, the Dura-Ace C50-60 variant, one of my favorite, I must say. And then the sacrilege part comes. Somebody commented on one of my earlier videos how this is not going to be a real Tarmac because my cockpit is not from Specialized. Are you serious? Get the F out of here. So is this not a real Tarmac because I'm not riding on Roval wheels? Nonsense. Get that shit out of here. Anyhow, so I could not source the integrated handlebar that Specialized makes for the Tarmac. So I ended up with what I had in my shed, which is the black ink from Factor integrated handlebar. I'm running 38 hoods. I believe they flare out to 40 or 42-ish. At the drops. My stem length is 100. In terms of integration, I mean, the Factor black ink bar went on without any issue. I did have some concerns in the beginning how the cables exit out and go into the head tube. I worried about that. However, it was like almost as if they made this bar for the Tarmac. Everything just fit perfectly, so zero issue. And some days I like the flared out the drops, and then some days I sort of wish my drops were not flared out and just kind of in line with the 38 mils like the hoods. So neither here nor there, but I'm not going to talk too much about the handlebar because that is not what you're going to get when you buy a Tarmac from your local Specialized dealer. So moving on. So as mentioned earlier, the bike size is 52. Normally I ride bikes somewhere around 525 stack and then about 380 in reach. This bike, I believe, comes right around 517 on the stack, and the reach is a 383. So that's like right in the sweet spot, and the wheelbase for this size 52 bike is about 978. So this is very snappy handling. definitely a road racing geometry. So this bike is 52, so in comparison with some of the other bikes, I would ride extra small or small on Canyon. Same goes with the Giant. I would ride small on Giant. My Pinarello was 51.5, Orbea was 51, PMC was 51. My Linsky is a small, Ribble Ultra is also small, so that kind of gives you an idea of in terms of sizing. Somebody would inevitably ask how tall I am. I am 5'10", but I am all torso with the shorter legs. So I buy bikes as if I'm 5'8". So 52 fits just fine with those stack and reach numbers that I shared with you earlier. First, the head tube. So when the bike was seen in the wild for the first time, a lot of people speculated about this. The head tube design, it's like a big nose sniffing thing that's just kind of sticking out, and a bunch of people were divided. Some people didn't care for it. Some people said it's atrocious. I look at it, it's like, I don't even notice it. Yeah, it looks a little different, but no big deal. And then there isn't anything exaggerated with this bike. Set aside the head tube, I mean, there is no funky thing like ISOFlow with the hole in the junction back here. There is no air deflector here like the Bianchis, or you know, the Cervelo integrated cockpit S5 that has this dual stem thing happening. It doesn't have anything like that. There's nothing odd. There is nothing overly exaggerated. There is nothing gimmicky. It's as pure as a bike is gonna be. And then the tubing's basically all round tubes. Yeah, they have some shaping to them. They're not exactly circle round tubes, but predominantly, you could say they're pretty much round. There is no overly exaggerated truncated foil cam tail on the down tube. It's pretty much round, squarish kind of deal. And then you do see a little bit of truncated foil happening on the seat post and the seat tube. Other than that, I mean, the bike looks pretty pedestrian if you ask me. The bottom bracket area also isn't like overly oversized. It's pretty minimal if you ask me. But that said, I never noticed any sort of a flex in the bottom bracket, so that is a great thing. In terms of tire clearance, like I mentioned earlier, I'm running basically 28 up at the front with a bunch of room left, and then I'm basically running 30 in the rear, which the 29 mil NV tire ballooned up to 30. I still see some room back there. I bet you can fit probably about 32 still, but at some point right around there, anything larger may be counterintuitive. Now this bike, Tarmac, is the most represented race bike in the pro peloton, ridden by so many teams, so number wise it will outnumber every other manufacturer in the pro peloton. However, appearance wise, the way she looks, the silhouette, it is very understated, and that may be something a lot of you might like, but some of you might not like. Maybe you opt for something flashier. So in terms of appearance, I'm gonna conclude by using this analogy. So she doesn't look like a blonde bombshell Jamie playing beach volleyball in Santa Monica, nor does she look like supermodel Gina, the brunette walking the runway out in New York City. She kind of looks like Charlotte, the neighborhood hottie, just hanging out at the local mall in Iowa. So DC, how does she ride, you may ask? Okay, so let's talk about that. When I test bikes, especially when I'm riding exclusively to test the bike, of course I may be with a group, but normally I pay attention on solo rides, just so that I'm not, because if I'm with the group, I may be chatting, I'm not paying attention, and I may be drafting behind somebody, it's a little difficult for me to get a feel for the bike. So normally I would ride alone, and not only that, I would ride alone without the head unit. Even if I have the head unit on a ride, I may just blank the screen out so I don't see the numbers. That is because I don't want the numbers to sway me during a test ride. What the how the bike feels, because if I look at the power number, that may sway me one way or the other in terms of how I ride that bike, and I just want the bike's feedback to come to me naturally. And do keep in mind, my bike isn't exactly the build you would be able to find at your local Specialized dealer, so everything I mentioned from here on out, do take it with the grain of salt. The Tarmac being an all-arounder, I mainly focused on her personalities and characteristics in 3 big categories, right? I paid attention to how she fares when I'm just gunning it on the flats, as to see her aero characteristics when she's not a out-and-out aero bike. I also paid attention to how she climbs when she's not built as the lightweight, weight weenie, climbing specific bike. And then I also paid attention to something that I do a lot, which is everything mixed together, just big, long route, 100-mile, long as day on the saddle, how she fares with the terrain differences, how she just fares overall under me. All right, so on flats where aerodynamics come into play at higher speed, my feedback would be based on my Cervelo S3 and my Ribble Ultra, which I currently still ride. Of course, the aerodynamics would be impacted and heavily influenced by the fact that my front wheels were sometimes a C50, 50 mil depth, and the rear running C60, 60 mil depth, which is about the same actually as my Ribble Ultra riding on Zip 404 Firecrest, which is like a 52 and 63 in the back, somewhere along those lines. Anyhow, so compared with the out-and-out aero bike, I'm really not noticing much difference. I'm not seeing that I'm suffering in terms of aerodynamics where bike is really holding me back. Now, do keep in mind, most of the aero drag is coming from the rider's profile head on with the as you're slicing through that air. The frame design comes, yes, it's aided by frame design's aerodynamic characteristics, but really it's your rider profile. So bike's aerodynamicness, I don't know how much it's really gonna come into play, but when I compare the same thing with other out-and-out aero bikes, I'm really not seeing much difference. When the road tilts up, I actually wasn't sure what I was expecting, but the bike basically fared really exceedingly well on climbs. For climbing, my favorite bike up to this point probably was my Canyon Ultimate CF SLX. And this was a bike that was built almost weight weenie. It was below 15 pounds. And this was the flagship bike of Canyon back then, before they had the CFR editions. So this was their top of the line, and I had the light, shallow depth carbon rims. I mean, climbing was pure joy on that bike, and I did bazillion miles on that bike with my friends. However, fast forward to Tarmac SL8, it basically exceeded every preconceived notion that I had going into this project. And what can I say? It's a beast on climb. To give you context of what I'm talking about, those of you that are Los Angeles based would be familiar with some of the segments that I'm gonna talk about. On Camp 9, this is a 2,300 feet climb on 6 miles up in north of Los Angeles. PR, no problem. And I'm not even sweating. Nichols Canyon, right next to Beverly Hills, saved me a minute giving me a PR. Now, I don't pay too much attention to PRs on Strava because the variables can't be the same every single time I go to those places. The wind may be blowing a certain way, air density may be different, my condition that day also may be different, no two rides will be the same. Therefore, I don't put too much credence, but just to give you some context, climbing was not an issue on this bike. And then on long days on the saddle with everything thrown in is where this bike actually shined. I never was beaten up. The bike's compliance, design and engineering is absolutely remarkable. Remember, I went into this whole thing thinking this is a bike I wanted to hate, but here's what I'm trying to tell you. So I was never beaten up on any of the rides. This is easily the easiest bike I've ever ridden, ever. And that includes all the bikes that I've had, a couple dozen bikes that I've ridden in the past. So that is, to me, super high mark, and I was quite impressed. I am not saying this is the best bike ever, but this is the easiest bike to ride, if you ask me. And to translate that into numbers, because that's the only thing quantifiable, here's what I'm gonna tell you. How do I know it's the easiest? I feel easy when I'm riding the bike, and even my friends commented, wow, you look really light on your feet. The bike looks great under you. Now, let's quantify that. So remember earlier I said how I don't ride with a head unit when I'm out riding. So I don't know what my output is. I'm just purely going based on, in terms of power and speed, I'm just based, my rides are based on just how I feel. And for this one route that I do, it's about 80 miles, maybe about 4,000 feet of climbing consistently, compared to other bikes that I did many times on that route. This bike, basically the duration of the rolling time is about the same every single ride, but when you look at the power analysis, I'm consistently 10 to 14 watts lower than my other ride. So when my perceived speed is the same, the power output is less. So you flip that around. If I were to use that 10, 14 watts towards actually putting that down, because I would have seen it on my computer if I ride with the computer, then I would have been that much faster. So here I am going at the normal speed that I'm used to, but I'm not putting out as much power. Then you might say, well, DC, but maybe that's a wrong reading from your power meter. Of course. So first time I saw this difference, what I did was I recalibrated, I zero reset the thing and make sure everything's updated with the Stages power meter. I'm running brand new power meter on this, as well as other, especially the Cannondale Super 6 that I'm testing simultaneously. Consistently 10 to 14 watts lower on this 80-mile route that I do. So when I came off the bike and I said, this is the easiest bike ever, it is actually true because I'm putting out less power to go the same speed. Handling wise, she is as predictable as one can imagine. She feels light, nimble, and precise, and so perfect to a point where I might even call it robotic. Speaking of robotic, let's revisit compliance a little bit. Front end, you feel nothing. Rear end, you feel nothing. This is why it doesn't beat you up over long rides. Now, that said, that might not entirely be a positive thing. When I'm riding, I want to feel the road and I want to feel alive, and me and the bike all as a one full system. But the bike is so finely tuned, so impeccably engineered, basically pinnacle of a bike building. It's almost uninspiring. It almost feels like a cold fish. there is no like this emotion and visceral feeling that you get from just out riding. The bike is just too perfect. I don't even know if that even makes sense when I tell you this. Make no mistake about it, I am saying the bike is basically almost too perfect. And because of that, she rides sterile, she rides clinical, and it feels surgical. To continue on that, the bike basically literally requires zero to minimal rider input. I'm not even like thinking that I'm riding when I ride the bike, and it's almost as if the bike is like AI designed and it's written by an AI rider. That's how I feel about it when I'm aboard the Tarmac SL8. Some of you may take that as complimentary, some of you may conceive that as a blemish. It is basically too perfect in everything it is asked to do. That said, this is a fantastically riding bike that almost makes me forget that I'm riding a bike and putting any effort down on the road. All right, brand new section starting this episode. So inevitably, a lot of you ask, would you take this bike over XYZ? So I'll just do this in each episode from now on with the bikes that I've shown you since the inception of this channel. The bikes that I owned before that, they're going a little bit too far back, so we won't. So let's just start that. BMC Road Machine versus Tarmac SL8. Tarmac SL8. Orbea Orca versus Tarmac SL8. That's little tough because Orca has such a great value proposition and it is a fantastically riding bike. But if a gun is pointed to my head now, do keep in mind the Tarmac will cost you more identically spec'd out with an Orbea Orca. Although I haven't checked the Orca's pricing lately, by hair, I will take the Tarmac SL8. Factor Austro Van versus Tarmac SL8. Boy, this is gonna split hair. This is gonna get some people upset. I love that Factor Austro Van, but I feel that it is a bit overpriced for what it is. I will take the Tarmac SL8. Pinarello Prince versus Tarmac SL8. I feel like this is an apple to an orange. They're not exactly the sort of a same vibe kind of a bike. Undecided. That's a cheap cop-out. Ribble Ultra all-aero bike versus Tarmac SL8. Again, this will surprise some. I will take the Ribble Ultra. Cervelo Soloist versus Tarmac SL8. Before I give you my pick, Cervelo Soloist, the frame set is $2,700. This frame set is $3,500. So there's an $800 difference when you equip the bikes identically. There is an $800 difference between the two. They ride very similar, although I feel like I'm a little bit more one with the bike when I'm on the Soloist. It is by far my favorite bike as of right now. So if I must pick against Tarmac SL8, I'm gonna give that a draw. You can't go wrong either way. Now, I do feel, like I said earlier, there is some sterileness, some disconnect between the bike and I, because it is so good. It just requires me no input from me. I mean, I'm pedaling and I'm pedaling as hard as I can, and it does maximize my effort. But there's a bit of surgical sterileness that I just don't get the same from the Soloist. So this is gonna be again another draw. You pick which one you like. Maybe one looks better to you than the other, and that's maybe that's the deciding factor. I like the way Soloist looks better than the way the Tarmac looks. Against my Cinelli and Linsky, not the same type of bike, so I won't make a choice there because that's literally apple to an orange. Versus Cannondale Super 6 Evo High Mod. You will have to wait, so subscribe. I will make that pick when I do the episode where I actually compare the two side by side, and I'll make my pick between the two in that episode. Versus Trek Madone, that is coming, so I'll make my pick with that. Versus Canyon Aero, that is also coming this year, so I'll give you my pick once that video is put together. In conclusion, I appreciate no foolery and none of the nonsensical BS that is prevalent in the cycling industry today. This is a basically road racing bike in its very purest form that is well engineered and does everything so well and just perfectly executed on all fronts. When I ride this bike, there are 3 E's. It's easy, it's efficient, and it's effortless. This is a very personal statement probably that I'm gonna make because not everybody will agree, but you tuned in to hear my opinion, so this is my opinion. This is a great bike, like I've been saying, despite a couple of the things that I don't much care for, but it's hard to explain, but let's just say that it's a great tool for the job, but not something that I'm emotionally attached to. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so the final point for this review episode, if you are a guy and you are a one bike guy, you don't care for having multiple bikes, no backup bike needed, you just want one bike that you beat the shit out of and ride the hell out of. I cannot think of another bike that would be more perfect. Literally does everything well, does nothing poorly. That said, way I would build it out if I were you. Now, if $15,000 is burning a hole in your pocket, go get whatever the flavor you want. I want to talk to me of the world and just normal guys that's working hard and riding hard. The way I would build it is I would get the non-S-Works version, just like this. This is not S-Works. This is a normal specialized Tarmac. I would put the Shimano 105 Di2 on there because it literally suffers nothing compared against Dura Ace Di2 or Ultegra Di2 set aside tiny weight penalty. Gives you all the functionality except for this thing over here, the button. The money that you save by going with the 105 Di2, I would put that money towards a wheel set. Great wheel set. If you're a specialized fanboy, you want to go get the CLX Roval, great. Actually, I actually don't know how that wheel set rides. So, me personally, I would use that money towards save up and towards like a Shimano C50s, a Shimano C60s, because really that nice set of wheels bring a bike to life, right? So that's what I would recommend if I were you. Okay, it's been a lengthy episode, but I did warn you because I get chatty, man. All right, thank you for sticking around if you are this far along in the video. I've been Diabetic Cycling. You've been awesome. Until next time, keep the oversight down, be safe out on the road. Be good humans. I'll see you next time with the Cannondale video. I'm out.